Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips. Give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations. I am so blessed tonight to be with a really special guest, Clarissa Moll. She is an award-winning writer and podcaster who helps bereaved people find flourishing after loss. She produces and moderates Christianity Today's flagship news podcast, The Bulletin. She's hosted CT's Surprised by Grief podcast, as well as a podcast for authors called The Writerly Life. Can I say that? Clarissa's writing appears in Christianity Today, The Gospel Coalition, Relevant, Modern Loss, Grief Digest, and more. She is the author of 4 books on bereavement, including the best-selling Beyond the Darkness, A Gentle Guide for Living with Grief, and Thriving After Loss and Hurt, Help, and Hope. Hope I said that right. A real conversation about teen grief and life after loss. Hope I said that okay. And that's what we're really going to be talking about tonight, your work. And somehow we just got disconnected. Let's see if she's going to come back here in a second. Might have to start this one over. Whoopsie doodles. Let's start that one over. Oh, there you are. You're back.
It just kicked me out.
But you're back. Yay.
All right.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. But I just was saying that we are going to be really diving into this book, Hurt, Help, and Hope for it's a real conversation about teen grief and life after loss, but it's really a book about any kind of grief. And I can attest to that because I was so blessed by this book. So Clarissa, thank you for being here. I feel like thank you for being in my home, and I'm in your home, I think. And it's just a joy to be with you. I'm so excited. I feel like I know you after reading your book. Like, it's so authentic, and just be prepared, people, when you read this, to please have some tissues on hand. You can really read this as a devotional, which I did. I spent it in my devotional time, and it was an amazing time between the scriptures, the prayers, the stories, your daughter, her voice in this book. It was just amazing. Can you tell us, oh, you're welcome. Can you tell us and our audience today your story, just whatever is on your heart to share? I know the book goes into it, and you've shared it many times on many podcasts, but just for our audience. And I just want to preface it by saying, when I thought about you being on this podcast, I was just so, really touched, because one thing we don't talk about a lot is when we have children with special needs or challenges or any kind of disabilities, we don't realize it is a type of loss. Mm-hmm. There's maybe a loss for a dream that we had for that child, right? We all experience losses, there's no doubt. But that's a unique loss. When you lose someone that you love, or you lose a dream of someone you love. And that's kind of what I just try to keep in mind as I was reading your book and just listening to this whole thing. Like, how does this apply to people that have lost something like a dream to them? Mm-hmm. Share your story, because it's precious, and it's a gift that you're giving this to the world.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be with you, Dawn. Homeschooling is something that's very precious to me, to my family. We homeschooled for 9 years, and it was a joy to do that. And we did it in all kinds of different ways, and we've gone through all different kinds of schooling options. And I feel really, in many ways, that homeschooling was a particular gift to us in our rawest season of loss. We had been homeschooling for 7 years, almost 8 years. And my husband and I had been married for almost 17. We have 4 kids. When on our family vacation in 2019, he died in a hiking accident. I was with the kids. My daughter was at a 4-H county fair with some old friends. We were visiting an area we had lived in before, and he went off for the day with a climbing partner and didn't come home. And so it was a sudden loss experience for us, and certainly reordered everything about our world, brought us down to those fundamental things of what deeply matters to you. Is it the way that you have organized your family, the way that you have prioritized your schooling, perhaps? It was, what does a family even look like? We had to ask those questions for ourselves over and again, because this was not a life-shaping loss for us. And so, when I think about homeschooling, and perhaps we'll talk about this a little bit more, I think about the unexpected gift that it was to us when we needed that kind of intimacy and that kind of care. And I think in many ways how homeschooling prepared us for this thing that you really can't be prepared for at all.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I know, just as you were even just sharing that little glimpse into the past, can you tell me, because I don't remember, how many years ago this happened now? How many years has it been now?
Yeah, it'll be 6 years in July.
6 years. Oh, I'm sure every year it just doesn't get easier when you lose someone. I know I've had some great loss in my life over the years, and unexpected things I never dreamed of or asked for, right? And when I read this book, so many emotions were going on for me inside of me. Number one, the first thing I kept saying was, how I wish I had this book. My whole life, even though I didn't experience loss in the same way, but it's a guide to navigate your life in the simplest things. Like the things that came up for me, I struggled with in this book. The places I wanted to go and run and hide and all that. I did not want to face it. I did not want to deal with it. And you touch on that. My son lost his best friend in high school. And I know after that, he was devastated for years. And if he would have had something like this, him and his friends, what a difference that would have made. What an incredible difference. So again, I thank you. But I wanted to, if you don't mind, just jump into a couple of concepts, which I know will probably take us down some other trails. And I'm okay with that. I don't mind. The first thing, coming from an educator profession, and also having worked with children that have been traumatized, either by the education system or just life in general. One of the terms that I absolutely loved on page 10 was called the grief brain. Brain. Like, what a beautiful concept. Was that something you made up, or was that something that you've heard before? I've never heard that term.
No, it's not something that I made up. Actually, in bereavement advocacy, which is where I spend a lot of my time when I'm not podcasting, brain fog, grief brain, these are descriptions for the kind of confusion and fogginess that descends on us after we've experienced a loss. And I love that you bring up the different kinds of losses, non-death losses,
Mhm.
because one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is that anytime we encounter a significant kind of loss, physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, practically, we're having to make adjustments for that change in our lives. And grief is the result. That's a natural result. And so, I think about some of the folks that you interact with who perhaps have pulled a child out of school because they're struggling there. And, they think, oh, you know what, we're at home now. This is going to be great. I've got curriculum that's picked out just for you. It's tailored for you. And they find that their child still struggles.
Right.
And, he can't pay attention, or he's struggling to retain information. And, there could be any number of reasons why those things are the case. But if grief and loss is part of that, then that's something that has to be named as part of your education plan, as part of the kind of care that you offer to your child in that transition period. Grief brain for someone who has lost a loved one, it's usually a merciful shock. That's how I usually describe it. Our brain can't take in all of the magnitude of what it means to experience the death of a loved one. And I believe it's God's mercy to us that our brains sort of move down into a torpor, almost like a sleep version. You've got the sleep screen on your computer where everything just runs, but it runs at a much slower and lower level. And this can be confusing for people. I lost my keys and I can't find where to find them. I can't figure out where to find them. Or I was and then I forgot why I was even going. These are very normal experiences that folks have when they've lost a loved one. And it's all part of the brain's adaptation to this new big earth-shattering information. And the reality is that whether your child has experienced a divorce, has experienced a big move, a breakup of an important friendship or relationship in their life, or yes, even coming away from a difficult experience in school, they may experience this kind of fogginess for a little while as their minds and their hearts adjust to their new environment. The good news is that grief brain doesn't last forever, that as slowly we're able to take in and wrap our heads around our new surroundings, around our new lives, the details of our new lives, we're able to adjust. I mean, in as much as God has given us this mercy in allowing our brains to sort of slow down and take things in a little bit more slowly and carefully, He's also given us brains that are plastic, that are resilient, that can develop new neural pathways. And so we know that not only is resurrection possible for us, that kind of coming back to new life after the death of a dream or the death of a loved one, but we also know that resilience is just written in our bones. It's how we were made. And I think that can bring a lot of hope for parents who are watching a child struggle, for parents who are experiencing a loss themselves, because, even as home educators, sometimes it's not our child who is struggling with loss. Maybe it's our loss, and we're grappling with it and also trying to show up to our kid every day at the kitchen table. And so we bring that into our educational setting as well. And that can bring with it a lot of challenges.
Can you, I know you go into this in the book a little bit, but can you share with our audience how your mornings, your school days looked like after this event, this tragic event? And I also want to say, because I have so many thoughts, your husband just sounds like he was the most amazing person. And the book that he wrote before, I mean, this story is amazing. This isn't fat enough. Uh-oh. I think you popped off again. There you are. But this book isn't big enough. There has to be a part 2, Clarissa, someday. But can you share that? Like, what did that look like for you? Like, you kind of touched on it, just having that gathering, with your family, your children. Were there other people there supporting and helping? Because like you said, you're trying to keep it all together, but you're also, comforting your family and trying to teach them, right?
Yeah, I had, when my husband died, it was right before the beginning of the school year, so it was, mid-July, and, we started school late that year. I usually was pretty good about staying on track with starting right after Labor Day, but we
Mm.
really eased into the school year because, even though my husband wasn't the primary educator in our home, I was that person. My daughter was heading into junior high, and we had made plans for him to teach her geometry. I
Mhm.
wasn't I maxed out on my math abilities pretty early on. And so
Yeah.
that had been part of the plan.
Mm.
We had enrolled our two oldest in a co-op that was meeting 2 days a week. And so
Mm.
it was, what do we do? We had planned on having two drivers. I would be home with the younger ones and he would pop over to drop them off and pick them up. How,
Right.
how is even the parent involvement component of this cooperative learning environment going to work if I'm a single mom now? I had to wrestle with a lot of those questions,
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
changes in curriculum to the logistical changes that come with, as homeschooling parents, our kids are involved in so many different things, and it's great, but it's not like all the activities are in one place. It's not a one-stop shop like it would be if they headed to school, and the theater program and the music program and the sports were all on the same campus. And so we do a lot of running around. And so there was the logistic part of that. And then there was also, and I don't want to underestimate it at all, the emotional differences.
Right.
My youngest had just turned 7. My oldest was just turning 14. Developmentally, they were in very different places. And
Wow.
while that works at home when you're homeschooling in ideal conditions,
Mm.
you set the younger one to do a task, you have the older one do some independent work so you can focus with the younger one. You can't do that easily in grief,
Mhm.
because grief is all hands on deck. It is
Wow.
nobody is left alone to cry unless they want to be left alone. That the insecurity of losing another parent can really cause clinginess,
Mm.
fears to crop up
Mm.
that were never there before, new insecurities. And so it really reshapes the way that you homeschool. Um, but I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think this is the sort of secret sauce that we
Mm.
as homeschooling parents really have. From the
Mm.
very beginning, our desire has been to deeply know our children,
Mhm.
to know
Right.
their strengths, know their weaknesses, know the things that they're afraid of. And not only that, but we've also always had the wisdom to pull in other experts
Mhm.
to to
Mhm.
supplement, scaffold, to teach alongside of us,
Right.
whether that is a grandpa who comes over and teaches an economics class like my dad did
Mm.
that first year, or whether it is,
Mm.
going to a church-based co-op or a community-based co-op. We think of schooling really as a community effort, even
Mm.
as it's a family effort. And what I
Exactly.
realized was that to survive and also thrive in
Mm.
this new landscape, I needed to lean into those things that I did know how to
Mm.
do well as a homeschooling
Mm.
mom. I could pay attention to my kids. I
Mm.
knew when math was overwhelming, and so we'd have to really pull back and take it super slow. We were used to doing that already.
Right.
I knew when they needed a little extra care from a co-op teacher, and so I could email or text that person in advance saying, "Hey, so and so's coming in today, needs a little TLC," because
Mm.
that was another mom who cared. And I
Right.
knew that building that village was something I had already done. So I
Right.
think even as disorienting as that
Mm.
very early season of raw grief was,
Mm.
um, homeschooling had provided me with vital tools that I believe, have brought us to the place that we are today, which is a family that's deeply connected, loves each other, has experienced different educational journeys, um, but, has each other's best interests at heart.
I just love that so much. One of the 2 visuals that I remember that I loved in the book, one was when your family took special books that you list in the appendix in the back here, just novels to help you process. Like, who does that? I mean, music, songs,
Homeschool
everything.
mom does that.
A homeschool
We
mom does that. Yep.
we read so much.
And but just I could see your family, oopsie, sitting down reading these books together,
Mhm.
talking about them, crying about them. How did literature or the Bible or anything, like you said, the songs, you have songs of joy when it's time to dance, you have songs of sorrow. By the way, I listened to a couple of them this morning, about 5 a.m. I was just trying to dive into that appendix and sitting there crying and really like just having a sense of this community, like you said, that you have grown, and you are an amazing mom. I will have to say that. I can only imagine. I mean, your husband, I can feel him in this book. I can feel this family. And I don't even know you, but I feel like I do through this story, and just not the story, but the care and the thoughtfulness that went through every single detail. The other part was when your daughter was talking about the rocks when they went through a hike. I think it was your daughter, and how no matter how the rocks were moved, the boys were building the rocks, that the water came through. And that was how life was now, that we had to navigate these boulders that were tossed into our lives and learn to, move around them. I'm not saying that probably as well. Can you expound on that a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that for us as home educators, literature is just it is such a rich garden,
Mm,
and we were always a very book-based family. It was something we were in a rhythm. We are now over 10 years reading novels as read alouds together. When my daughter comes home from college, she still joins us for the read alouds.
mm,
Senior in high school, that's just part of our family rhythm, that we would read together, and then we would pray together, and then we would go to bed every night. And
mm,
we started doing that when they were really little. Our first book was Charlotte's Web,
mm,
and when I think about the way that children grieve, it isn't like adults. When adults experience a loss, there's some predictability. I'll feel sad. I'll feel sad for a while. I may feel sad for a really long time.
mm,
I may pull away from relationships. I may struggle to be enthusiastic about the things that used to bring me joy.
mm,
And these are all normal adult responses to loss, but they're not normal responses for children to loss.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
when it comes to children, they understand loss as they develop over the years. And so a child who is 4 or 5 may experience the death of a loved one and head straight back to play and never think anything more of it.
mm,
And an 8-year-old may ask questions that really feel like a knife to the heart. Things like,
mm,
what does it mean to be cremated? Or can grandma breathe underground?
mm,
When
mm,
they're sitting there at the
mm.
funeral service or at a graveside service. And, those questions are so literal, they rock us, right? But
Right.
we know as educators that our children are moving from those very concrete building block ideas to more abstraction.
Mm,
And so we see that in their educational journey, and we know that's a part of their developmental journey as well. And
mm,
so one of the reasons why I really leaned into literature, we've leaned into music, is
mm,
that it has a wide range of emotions that are expressed.
mm.
And
Yeah,
so
that's what you said.
maybe you're feeling joyful and you're not missing dad today. Well, sing
Right.
it out. Be
Yeah.
joyful. There is so much world and so much hope that's still in
Wow.
store for you. And if you're having a really rough day, then, a character in a read aloud that we're reading at night may deeply resonate with you.
Wow.
One of the things that we've taken as an opportunity to do together as a family is to talk about how poorly death is described in literature.
Mhm.
Having lost a loved one, sometimes we'll pause and be like, is it like that? No, nobody would actually ever say that.
Right.
And so it's even been some literary analysis, working in there as
Right.
we kind
That's
of
very
understand.
homeschool.
Exactly, kinda understand characters
Right?
and what they're experiencing and whether that's authentic. So I really feel like, in so many ways, perhaps I've done this grief thing, just like a homeschool mom would do it,
Beautiful.
because we were so primed with these amazing resources around us anyways,
Mm,
that it's something. And even, you mentioned, the rocks in the stream. We were
mm,
very much an outdoor family, still
mm,
are, love to do nature studies and just be outside. And
mm,
what better picture of renewal and life after death, God's promise of resurrection, than
mm,
to be out there raking leaves, to see the
mm,
daffodil bulbs begin
mm.
to sprout in the spring. We've got object lessons all around us. And
Right.
so, it's a lot of that integration that we were just doing on an everyday basis that we were now able to apply to a new area of our lives.
What a blessing. I mean, so many things you said about community, about just being together, already having those relationships built. It was just a natural progression to keep going and find those questions and those, like you said, through the characters, through the different characters. And I know one thing in your book, and I'm jumping ahead because I've got these pages marked, but I know you talk in a section about the kind of, I'm just going to say it in my words, the dumb things people say when you lose someone, right? And did you would you say that you experienced those things, or your children did, or were those things that you found in literature, like, that's not a kind thing to say? Or how was that? How did that come about? Because that's a pretty unique thing that you write about. I cannot say how impressed I am. I'm glad I have this book. Like, thank you for sending it to me. And um, I will treasure this and
Thank
refer
you.
back to it. I was thinking of all the people that I know that should read this. It's okay. Anyway, back to my
Yeah.
question.
Well, I think that all of us are fumbling along to develop a language of consolation. We're not
Mm,
good at it.
mm,
As a culture, we avoid death. As
mhm.
Even as Christians, we avoid death.
Yeah.
It's hard to think about. We want to go straight to empty tombs and the joy that comes after, and the daffodils and the
Mhm.
hope. It's hard for us to sit with hard things.
Mhm.
And so, when I think about the hard things that were said to me, to my family, I taught my children early on. I said, you know what? All the stupid things that people say that actually really pinch, really hurt, what they're trying to say is, I love you and I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
don't feel like that's enough. And so
Right,
they kind of spin extra words,
right,
because no one has told them it's enough to say, I love you and I'm sorry.
right.
Um, and so I think, being able to interpret that and being able to understand that was really helpful. And I think for anyone who has experienced, you talk about the loss of a dream.
Mm,
If a parent, I think about a parent I know who recently received an autism diagnosis for their
mm,
child. You wouldn't walk up to that parent and say, well, I know it's hard now, but better days are coming. It would
right.
fall so flat.
Yeah.
When we're going through something that is challenging for us, that may feel like a loss to us, may feel like a disappointment, new information that's big and unknown that we're trying to grapple with, we
Mhm.
don't need someone to sort of correct the feeling.
Right.
We
Or fix
simply need
it.
someone to
Yeah.
sit with us,
Right,
right?
right.
And I think even in that, it's just another way that I feel like, when I think about home educators, it's something that we have. If you want to have community as a home educator, you better get good at that, right?
Yeah.
Because we all are taking different paths, and there's no place for judgment there. There's
Mhm.
really only space for grace. And
Mhm.
so, when a parent is struggling with their child, we don't try to correct them. We
Mhm.
just say, "Gosh, I'm really sorry, I've
Mhm.
had a similar kind of problem with my kid," or
Right,
"I've never gone through that before, but that must be super hard."
right.
We are, because of the diversity of the community in which we move and work as home educators, I think that we are already practicing the skills of that language that builds bridges and can offer consolation in a
Mhm.
way that is really comforting and enriching to people who are deeply in need.
That's amazing. I just love that so much. One of the, I think I'm moving back toward the other way now. There was a section where you went into like a survival response. We talk about the stages of grief, right? And we've most of us have heard about the stages of grief, but how many of us have heard here's the response, here's what you can do to survive, and things like movement, food, the food you eat. Be careful that it's not sugar and laden with not good stuff. Sleep, the power of sleep, and giving yourself the grace to take naps when your body is just done. Moving slowly, like these were just so precious and spoke so deeply to me. How about this one? Avoid loud or crowded spaces because it might be overwhelming, right? And then on, and I'm sure you have more to share, but I'm always kind of a little bit of a nerd, and I'm like, how did you come up with these and why? I mean, I'm sure it's through your work and studying the grief process and everything, but some of these to me are very unique. And then we get into the 8 ways, which I absolutely love, to help your body adjust to grief. We just don't think about that. We think, oh, there's stages of grief. We have to go through is it 5 stages of grief? We go through those stages and then we're done.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case for everyone, right? Some people can grieve for years and years and years. I know a little girl right now who's grieving for her grandpa. And I'll have to be honest, there's times I'm like, can we stop talking about the grandpa? Because it's been years, but that was her best friend. And I mean, that sounds kind of mean to me, but it's not out of being mean. It's out of, I can't fix this.
Yeah.
I want you to be okay. But it's like not unraveling for her. It's not being completed in her or maybe processed. I don't know that I'll ever feel complete for her. What would you say to someone like that? Like a little girl says, 5th grader, and we're talking about all the things the survival response, the things that she would need to do, even at this stage, because some of us take a very long time to grieve. It could be
That's
years
right.
before we finally say, okay, I'm going to stop running. I'm going to stop Netflixing, and eating, and I'm going to get down to the nitty gritty here.
Yeah. So, if in that kind of circumstance, I would say that, that her response may be entirely normal. We know that children re-grieve at every developmental milestone. So she will grieve the loss of her grandfather when she is 8. She may grieve it again when she turns 16 and gets her license, and she just wishes she could tell him about it. She will probably grieve his absence again when she graduates from high school, when she goes to college, maybe when she has her first baby and she slips his name into that baby's middle name. All of those points in time are appropriate moments to experience that loss, perhaps in a very raw and tender way again. It may come back like a wave. A child may say, I just feel like it's, crashing over me again. When 2 weeks ago, they seemed to an outside observer to be totally fine.
Yeah.
And that's because our understanding of grief, of the ramifications for our person's absence, changes and grows as we change and grow. And so to accommodate those children, it's important to receive their grief responses and then help them to enact something to help them integrate that loss. So maybe it's, I know Grandpa can't read your letter, but would you like to write him a letter tonight to just tell him how much you miss him? And maybe it's, hey, you know what? I've been missing him too. I wonder what Grandpa would like for dessert tonight. Let's make his favorite dessert. Or let's just sit and look at old pictures and talk about memories. All of these things take the emotions from what is just an internal spin, and it gives a child a sense of agency. I can do something with these feelings. I don't have to hold them inside. I see an adult who's here as a companion who's not going to abandon me, who's going to sit with me in that, who's going to
Yeah.
receive
Yeah.
my pain and help me do something with it, not pack it away, but be able to talk about it so that in a way it's woven like threads into the tapestry of their lives. Really, those threads of grief are threads of love. And it's just like
Mm.
creating a hole in your own sweater. You know, you love the sweater so much, you don't want to send it to Goodwill. So what do?
I have one.
You take out a needle, you take out a needle and you weave those threads back into the sweater. And that's really what you're doing as you're helping a child at any developmental milestone. And those aren't just physical. Maybe it's puberty, maybe it's not. It could simply be final exams or standardized tests, the first time they take a standardized test.
Right.
It could be an achievement in Boy Scouts. It could just be an ordinary day that they wake up and say, wow, on a sunny day like this, Grandpa would have brought me fishing. And so those kind of moments allow a child to weave that love into the fabric of their story.
Right. Well, I thank you for that. I didn't mean to sound like calloused or anything.
No,
It's just
not at all.
sometimes I
Not
feel
at all.
helpless. I feel helpless that, I don't know what to say. I can support in the beginning, but when it's later and I see her still entangled or hurting, but I love that. She is an artist, this little girl. And I have a game. It's an emotional game. And it talks about your feelings, your choices, and then something else. But she would always come in and play that whenever she was, really hurting. But I just to tell you on a side note, after I finished your book, the morning that I finished it, I wrote a letter to my dad. And my dad's been gone for 28 years. And he was my best friend in the whole world, besides Jesus, but the worldly dad. And I wrote this little poem. It was called Just One More Time. If I could just, wear your socks and your old big sweatshirt and sit across the table from you, it was just that. And I didn't know that was in me. But you just gave the whole world that's listening to this and every child and every grown up, I'm 64 years old. You gave this to me in this book that I can still have those moments, not just to remember in my head, but to put something in writing. And then I listened to one of those songs called, I think it was called like, I'll Never Forget You or something. Do you remember that one?
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we put a lot of them on there.
It's called I Won't Let You Go.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And I added that at the bottom of my little poem to my dad. And then I did like an art piece with a heart and said, oh, I won't let you go. And it was just so good. So thank you for that, for my own heart, because sometimes when you're a grown up, you feel kind of silly crying for your dad, but I still do cry for him. I still love him. And, this can transfer to all kinds of people, right? In our lives, all kinds of losses. You really touch on that in the book. And I just love that. Can I jump over to a new idea, what I love as a teacher. And if I could just read this on page 48, in every classroom, there are students who like to answer questions and those who hold back. There are students who like to draw attention to themselves and those who'd like to disappear into the woodwork. Whether or not a student wants to raise a hand in class, each body in each seat matters. The same is true for your emotions. Such beautiful writer. In the classroom of your heart, you're the teacher. You stand at the front. I'm going to cry. And you get to choose who speaks. I would love to read this to this little girl. Does fear often raise her hand to share? You need to listen to her. Do you sense anger has something to say, but doesn't feel brave enough to say it? Maybe it's time to create space in your day to let anger speak. Does sadness seem to want to drown out all the other emotions? It's okay to ask her to be quiet for a moment so joy can finally talk. All your emotions, both the loud and the quiet voices, have important things to say about your loss. Just so precious to be able to acknowledge our hearts in the simplest ways. I want to just say one more thing that keeps coming to me. Everyone should read this book. I truly believe that. Because if you don't need it, someone that you know is going to need it. And it's going to create in you a heart of compassion for those people. But I felt like this was like a mother coming to my soul, like a mother coming and speaking just peace into me, like holding me, like I felt held. I remember saying that at the end. I feel really held in all my sorrow. And I had a pretty rough life, with in my childhood, a lot of trauma. And this really spoke to that. Can you believe that after all
I'm
those
so
years?
glad. I'm so glad. Well, we all, we scoff at the idea of that inner child sometimes, but I think
Yes.
we are all still tender people. This is why Jesus calls us lambs. It's okay to be a little lamb and need to be held. And I think, I always love it when folks will share with me that they're engaging with their loss in new ways many years later. Because I think for a lot of us, depending on the culture you grew up, the generation you grew up in, and there could be any number of factors. We're told to stuff the hard things down.
Right.
We live in a very pull yourself up by your bootstraps culture. We have this idea, this picture of American idealism where we can venture off into the sunset and rub some dirt in it and get back in the game.
Mhm.
We have this picture of unreasonable strength. And, if you're a person of faith, whatever faith you are a part of, your faith does not call you to that kind of superhuman strength.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we impose that as like
Mhm.
bondage on ourselves. And so, it's always an honor for me to
Mhm.
meet with folks who say, hey, you know what? I've let that stuff go. I'm gonna face this in ways that I haven't faced it before, or face it in a new and fresh perspective, because the grief will remain forever. We know that grief will one day come to an end, but it's not in this lifetime. And
Right.
so, really, it's about how do we learn to live with this unwelcome companion, which
Right.
students, by the way, in one of the largest children's bereavement studies that the New York Life Foundation does, they said in their 2023 study that almost 80% of students who were surveyed after the death of a loved one said that they believed they had been able to move forward and that their loss had created within them a sense of resilience and a bravery to face hard things that came before them in life.
It's just
And
amazing.
so, it really is, it is acknowledging our weakness is actually a pathway to real strength.
I really believe that. I've experienced that. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, we could talk for an hour. There are two other areas there are many areas that stuck out to me. And I'll list those at the end, the prayers and the scriptures. The prayers, I mean, how many times when we're struggling or we're hurting, we can't pray. We don't have the words. You have the most beautiful prayers in this book. But one of the areas that I really loved was, and I wrote, the science of crying. The
Mhm.
science of crying, of letting yourself cry whenever the tears come. And that's something that I even tell myself and as an adult, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And I cried in this book. I want to tell you the honest truth. Hello world. After I finished this book, I went and crawled in my bed and I just covered myself up with all these blankets and I just cried. I
Mhm.
I can't even say exactly, I'm going to cry right now, why I was crying, but it was just like this freedom to honor that need to do that. Sometimes life just wells up, and my age, there's a lot of life there, right? And your life too. But you go into this in such tiny detail for children, for kids, for adults. This really should be for adults. But your next one. But when you say, how do I handle my emotions when I'm at school, work, or church? Like you said, some trigger may happen. The sun, you smell the coffee, or you go, oh, he looks like my grandpa. That happens to me a lot.
Mhm.
I notice as I'm getting older, like people remind me of people.
Yeah.
Like, I'll see someone that looks like my son when he was a little boy, and I'll go, "Oh, that looks just like him," and it just brings those things up. But that, and then I'm going to put two things together here. You know how I am. 5 ways to make peace. That was so essential to help you make peace with the past, embrace the present, and release the future into God's hands. And again, I would segue that into sometimes when we ask God why.
Mhm.
Can you speak to any of that? I don't know. That was a lot, but I have to make
Sure.
sure
Yeah.
it's covered.
Well, I think first, I want to honor that vulnerability of the story that you shared about crying, because I think that's how we do this well.
Mm,
Is we model for our children vulnerability in a safe way.
mhm.
Um, in our culture, vulnerability is not considered to be a prize or a
Right,
virtue.
right.
Uh, it is not always, we are not always handled with tenderness in our vulnerability.
Mhm,
And so really, as parents, as caregivers, as loved ones, that's a lot of our work when we're dealing with someone who is grieving, to model the kind of vulnerability that we hope that they'll develop as adults.
mhm,
And that vulnerability comes in a lot of different ways. It may be crying. It may also be, like you say, making peace with the past.
mhm,
Part of what needs to be acknowledged is that when we lose a loved one, it's not always a sad event. Uh,
mhm,
Sometimes there has been a complicated relationship. Sometimes
mhm,
there has been estrangement. Sometimes there has been abusiveness or deep unkindness. Um, Not every death is a good one.
mhm,
And so, when we're talking specifically about teenagers, which, Hurt, Help, Hope is directed specifically for teenagers,
mhm,
uh, they know this and we know it too. And so part of what we're doing is modeling the vulnerability of being willing to sit with that complexity,
mhm,
that we may need to say, "I forgive you," to
mhm.
someone who isn't around anymore.
Right,
That,
right.
we may need to say, um, "You hurt me, and I'm sorry for the words I said to you in return."
Mhm.
That we have to do, there may be reconciling work that we have to do around our loss,
Mhm.
and that takes a great deal of vulnerability. It
Yeah.
takes time, it takes thoughtfulness, it takes a trusting relationship with a trusted adult who will come alongside that teenager and say, "You know what? I'll sit without judgment and just listen." I
Yeah.
you know, because your response to the death of this loved one, to the death of this marriage, to the diagnosis of a sibling, it's different from mine. And I wanna learn. I wanna sit at your feet. You be
Mm,
the teacher now. I will
right.
be the vulnerable adult and say, "I don't have all the answers. Would you teach me what it's like to be a
Mm,
teenager who's wrestling with something like this? Because I trust that you actually have wisdom to share in this moment."
yeah.
And that takes a lot of vulnerability all around. You
Mhm.
know, when I think about our experience of loss as a family, it hasn't been an easy trajectory in any way. It has been a deeply painful journey. My children will be the first to say I've made a lot of mistakes,
Mhm.
that there are things that we wish we could have done differently, that we should have done differently if we
Mhm.
had known better. And so it is creating a space where those truths can sit in an
Yeah.
atmosphere of mercy and grace and
Mhm.
forgiveness. And if you have lost something that was hurtful in your life, it
Mhm.
may take a long time for you
Mm,
to feel a sense of peace in that.
right.
And that's where, for us as Christians, as people who love Jesus, we don't have to depend on our own, you know, intellect, wit, savvy, deep
Mhm.
wells of compassion to get that job done. We
Mhm.
can rest in knowing that as we're forgiven in
Mm,
Jesus, we can
mm,
extend forgiveness to others,
mhm.
that we can bring our whole selves to Him and find full acceptance. And we can rest in that, because when you know you're fully accepted and loved, it's a lot easier to do the beginning work,
That
that
is so
hard work. of forgiving someone else.
I love that so much. I was talking to a lady yesterday with the magazine. She was interviewing me, and I kept saying to her, you have to know the backstory. You have to know the backstory and how God used that story to bring me where I am today and what I'm doing in my work today. And the poor lady, like, I don't think she was anticipating that kind of, she's like, wow, it was a pretty big story. But one of the components that God used, a couple of components, one was art and writing. And I am in the process right now of writing my story, like my memoir for my children and whoever else is interested. But that process of just going back to those journals and reading through those journals and seeing where I was and the questions of my heart, the anger, the hurting, and then how God, just like David in the Psalms, right? He'd be like, God, where are you? And the next verse, he would be like, blessed is the Lord for me, and some great thing. And it was like that for me in that ebb and flow. But you're right. At the end, it was knowing how loved I was when God really tenderly years, even when many people would leave me, even friends were like, you know what, we don't think we can handle your life anymore. God was like, no, I'm not leaving you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you what real love is. And that's him. It was him. And it has made all the difference. So, but I have to say too, even this moment with you, and this was no just funny thing that you came into my life with this story, and that I had the beautiful, blessed opportunity of speaking to you, because I needed this. I still needed it. I still need healing. We all do. And I think sometimes we can stay busy. We can let's get more education. Let's just do other things. But this really is such a beautiful journey of sitting down. I think everyone needs it. I know it's for teenagers, but I'm thankful that you wrote it and I got to read it. So, because I may not have ever read that, but I think it's the best book I've ever read on grief, on suffering, and on love. Like, truly knowing that you're loved. One of my favorite activities, and I love your activities, were like these circles, right? Who are your closest people? Who are your friends? Who are your acquaintances in your community? And how you teach us, we don't have to tell everyone all the gory details. Even if people ask, we can hold a lot of that story. Like you said, there are details that are sacred to you and your family that other people don't need to know. And that, I was just like, gosh, I wish I had a mom like that. You are just a blessed woman. I'm telling you, and your children are blessed too. But I want to ask you in this last little bit of time, is there anything from this book that you want to point out or share? Like, because I'm sure I didn't cover everything. There's no way. But that's on your heart today for these moms, for our families at Sped Homeschooling, that just comes to mind for you.
I think the number one thing is that it is a book that we wrote specifically for a teenage reader. It's the first book in 20 years that has been published by, it's the first Christian grief support book for teenagers that's been published in the last 20 years in traditional publishing. So it really is a landmark book in that respect. And, my book for adults, my guidebook for adults is Beyond the Darkness.
Okay.
Then I have a picture book for 4 to 8 year olds called Hope Comes to Stay. And so really trying to create a whole spectrum of bereavement advocacy books. There's a devotional in there. But really, this book is special because it's written by a teenager and her mom for a teenager, trusted adult. We know that teenagers don't like to talk about big feelings with adults. They're pretty selective about what they share and with whom. And we want to honor that. And so, if this is a book that a student in your life needs, it's one of those, just slip it across the kitchen table and they can tuck it under their pillow and read it at night and read it, come back to it. It doesn't need to be read in order. It really is just pop around and find the information that you need. We've tried to be really organized in how we laid out the book so it could be used by a teenager who wasn't ready to talk to an adult. Right. But over and over throughout the book, we say, talk to a trusted adult. talk to a trusted adult. And we set the book up in a Q&A format specifically for that reason, because we know that it's hard to get the conversation started. And so we wanted to model that for students. We've even give students questions that they can ask. So, I encourage teenagers, I say, read the book and then choose one of those questions and go ask an adult in your life. And you can decide who gives you the better answer. If it's the book or if it's your parent or, your coach, your Sunday school teacher, see what new information that you gain from asking a real live person this question. So we really wanted to model the kind of discourse that we hope students develop as they're learning to live with loss.
I love that. Clarissa, your daughter is so beautiful, just like you. Can you tell me, how's your family today? Like, I feel like I know them a little bit and send them my love, but how are you doing? How is everyone doing? I mean, I don't know if that's a good question. It probably is one of those, don't ask that one, I don't know, in the book, but I really mean that from my heart. How are you?
Well, I'm newly remarried. I'm a remarried widow. We've been married for 2 years now, and we have a blended family of 9. So it's a wild and crazy place with 2 dogs, a cat, and a hamster. This is it's like a zoo sometimes. But one of the things that's so impressed upon me, even as I see my children thrive and develop as people, is the truth that grief never leaves, and that what you realize over time is that grief comes with it so much wisdom. It helps you to prioritize, to understand what your values are, to make life choices according to an eternal perspective instead of a perspective of just the here and now. And so I think that, for our family, even as there are significant challenges for children after remarriage and the reconstitution of a family and a blended family, the ongoing experience of grief as they move into adulthood, I trust that they have the skills that they need, that really what we began all those years ago in homeschooling them around the kitchen table, we didn't believe we could teach them everything they needed to know, but we hoped that we would give them good tools in their toolbox, tools of curiosity, a drive to discover, inquisitiveness, persistence, all of these kinds of tools that would make them good learners and good people. And I find that the same is true today, that as they grow, that I think they've got the tools that they're going to need to succeed.
Can you tell me all their ages?
Since we have 7 children, they range from age 12 to age 19. So we've got someone graduating from high school.
Okay, so you don't have any little ones, but that's great. No. Well, Clarissa, this has been amazing, and I know it's going to bless so many people. It has blessed me. I was not anticipating that. I was coming at this with a different mindset, and God blew me away with this book. So I just pray people will reach out to you, and I know we'll have all your information where people can find the book and your other books on Amazon. That's where they can find them. And then any way to contact you. Do you do any kind of coaching, like one-on-one with people or anything?
I don't. Okay. I would love to, but I read a Substack on the weekly so that folks can connect there and try to offer as much encouragement I can in that community.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you are just an angel on this earth for everyone, and I thank you so much for your beautiful time. So hang in there. I'm going to end this recording. And if anyone has any questions or comments, please like our page and share our ministry with other families that may need to hear these amazing insights today. Thank you so much.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.